the president has assigned to Mr. Hegsteth, who's the Secretary of War, it used to be called Secretary of Defense, to look into this. And that is not a suggestion. It's an executive order. He published it. He put it out all over the internet. And he said, we will release any and all. I will tell you that there are key people in the intelligence community who are in those files or similar files. And that is a real hindrance to disclosure and to this information coming out honestly. Because remember, the Epstein Island whole fiasco was a honeypot set up by the intelligence community to entrap and control powerful people, both governmental and corporate. Anything you can imagine, we've already done. Anything you've seen in Star Trek, we have. And it's not at Area 51, it's out in the desert out here. Now, I've been to that site. I've been in a chopper over the underground opening and filmed it and given it to the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Watch Mojo's Unveiled podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and joining me again today is Dr. Stephen Greer. He's a retired physician, an author, founder of the Disclosure Project, and pioneer of the CE5 protocol for human-initiated ET contact. Dr. Greer, how are you today? Thanks for joining us.
Good seeing you again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. This year has been moving really fast. A lot of stuff has happened in 2026 so far. This already feels like old news, but a couple of weeks ago, former President Obama and current President Trump made certain comments about aliens and UFOs. The Department of War, suggested that they would be releasing more UFO documents, which got a lot of people excited. I wanted to start off by getting your take on that. Do you think this is more political theater, or is this a legitimate disclosure effort that we're seeing?
No, it's a legitimate disclosure effort. Whether it comes to anything fruition is going to require our intervention. So let me unpack that. First of all, the president misspoke a bit about Obama, saying something out of a classified context. And here's why. I had provided the briefing for Obama through his right-hand guy, John Podesta, back in 2009. And as you know, I mean, starting all the way back to Bill Clinton and his CIA director, I provided this sort of information. So when we did that, it went to the president and his people, but he was not able through channels as the president of the office of the presidency to get into the system because the system is being run illegally, which of course I discovered on December 13th, 1993, when President Clinton's CIA director bluntly told me that he and the president were being blocked from programs related to UFOs. So this is when I concluded, this is almost 33 years ago now, that the projects related to UFOs, the so-called legacy projects, were unconstitutional and were a RICO criminal organization. So that's been in the hopper for a long time. So it doesn't surprise me. It surprises most presidents and it surprises most people in Congress and the media to learn that there has been basically a silent coup d'etat on this issue that happened in the late 1950s under Eisenhower. So in Obama, he honestly said, if you look at what he said, yes, I know the aliens, quote unquote, are there, but I was never able to see anything directly as president. And if there is something going on, he sort of nervously laughed, some big conspiracy. All true. But when he mentioned the Area 51 complex, it was very important in the 50s and 60s. That has moved out to other sites, and we know where they are. And that's been provided to law enforcement and also the Pentagon, the White House, and Congress, because we have those locations. So, I mean, for people introduction here, I found that the global disclosure movement, although it's been hijacked by charlatans and CIA disinformation cutouts in the UFO subculture, and that's another discussion. But I think that in terms of having the intel, the intelligence information, we have it, it's been provided. And so, but it doesn't mean, let's say let's just go to another country
Mhm.
If I give the Minister of Defense of Great Britain or the United Kingdom or Australia, who I met with, all this information, it doesn't mean that through their system they're going to get anything, because this is sort of running as a ROSA, sort of a secret governmental program that is above or beyond the reach of most people in government, unless they're part of the conspiracy, which means they're also part of the criminal enterprise. And I will tell you that law enforcement in the United States have concluded that that is a RICO, a racketeering influence corrupt organization. And it's due to the work we've been doing with them for a few years. So this is happening behind the scenes very quickly. Now, when Obama made that statement, it kind of triggered Mr. Trump to say what he said, because he sort of jumped the gun, Mr. Obama, by saying that. And so we know what has been going on since the transition, where we've been providing granular information and executive order recommendations to this administration. Now, the danger here is the president has assigned to Mr. Hegseth, who's the Secretary of War, it used to be called Secretary of Defense, to look into this. And that is not a suggestion. It's an executive order. He published it. He put it out all over the internet. And he said, we will release any and all. Well, first of all, neither the president nor Mr. Hegseth has access to any and all, because most of these operations have been privatized into the corporate world beyond the reach of the president and beyond the reach of Mr. Hegseth. Even though taxpayers have paid for it largely. And so even Mr. Rubio admitted that was the case, because about 4 years ago, I got asked to go into the Senate Intelligence Committee, SCIF, the Secure Compartmented Information Facility, and provide everything I have to the Senate Intelligence Committee, of which Mr. Rubio was the vice chairman, right? As the ranking Republican. Now he's the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. So he was able to get a huge amount of information through that mechanism that went on for a long time. Now, fast forward to this order coming out and was publicly released. That puts a clock on this. That can be a bad thing, and it can be a good thing. And let me explain why. If they don't drill down outside their system, they're going to come up goose eggs. And then they're going to put out something to the public that's going to be nonsense. Like, well, we looked into this and there's no there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why am I saying this? Let me give you an example. Everybody knows who astronaut Gordon Cooper was, a very famous early Gemini capsule astronaut. In 1956, a UFO landed broad daylight out on the dry lake beds out by Edwards Air Force Base. I knew Gordon Cooper quite well, and he and I lectured in Washington at a very high-end think tank some years ago during the Clinton years. And during that period, the Secretary of Defense for Bill Clinton asked astronaut Gordon Cooper, for all the details, granular, actionable intelligence of that event. And he provided it to the Secretary of Defense. Gordon Cooper gave him everything. The Secretary of Defense came back to him and said, that footage, because this was daytime movie footage, 50s, of a landed UFO out at the Edwards complex out on that dry lake bed. Well, guess what happened? He literally came up with nothing, even though he was the Secretary of Defense. And so I told Gordon Cooper, the astronaut, I said, it's gone into this black hole that is a parallel covert program that is illegal. And so they don't mind denying access to the constitutional authorities, whether it be the Congressional Oversight Committee, the Gang of Eight in the Congress, the president, or whoever. Now, most people say that sounds like a conspiracy theory. I said, no, this is a matter of fact I can prove in a court of law. So that is the context of what I'm saying next. And that is, we are going to try to get everything we can to help the president and Hegseth get to the bottom of this. Now, whether they accept that or whether they stay within the box, the system, which is basically a prison, Bill Clinton paraphrased Truman when he said the White House is the crown jewel of the federal penitentiary system. And he was right. And so if you just stay in that system, you're going to be gaslit. Now, they may get something. What I predict they'll get will be part information and 80% disinformation. Because that's when there's a real inquiry and it's being ordered from the top, that's what happens. What happened to Ronald Reagan. It's what happened to, like, Ronald Reagan drilled down on this. I know the man, CIA, who's very up there in years now. He's left at CIA, who provided Reagan with the initial briefing when he was running for president, because Reagan had seen these UFOs when he was flying on the governor's plane in California. And this gentleman has told me specifically that what they do, they provide the president with some information, but then a lot of false information to manipulate the policies. In this case, it was to get Reagan to spend billions on brilliant Pebbles and SDI, Star Wars weapon system, which the public reason was to knock down intercontinental ballistic missiles from the Soviet Union back then. The real reason was to put money in this black project to target and knock down extraterrestrial vehicles, which we have been doing for decades illegally. All right. So it's very easy when you're in that bubble of the White House or the bubble at that level of the federal government. I've been dealing with this for 30 some years, to easily be deceived because they're so busy. They're going to have to turn to people, and there are often embedded people in the Secretary of War's office or the White House who are just there knowing if this comes up, how do you placate the president or the Secretary of Defense and give them just enough information to satisfy them because they're busy, and most of it's disinformation. So we are very aware of these games, and it's something that is fraught with danger. Because let me explain something. If this goes badly, this will go the way of COVID or the imbroglio with the Epstein files, where it's a totally unforced error of what happened, or what happened with 9/11 and the cover-up of what really happened there. If that happens here, it'll be 1,000 times worse than COVID or 9/11, because it will pivot the presidency and the Secretary of War into thinking that there's an alien threat, which there isn't. All the information out there that is very scary about UFOs has been a psychological warfare operation of CIA and the aerospace companies as a disinformation campaign. And we know this, and we can prove it. So, but if you're new to this, see, a little bit of information is a very dangerous thing. 99% of the people in the UFO subculture have just taken all this stuff at face value, not knowing, quite frankly, the way counterintelligence and disinformation operatives work, and social engineering through subcultures and media work. So this is something we've studied very thoroughly. And I guess many people would call me, ironically, the biggest skeptic ever about 90% of the information out there. Now, the core of it is true. I mean, that we're not alone. There are non-human extraterrestrial civilizations out there. They're certainly not hostile. If they were, we'd be smoked already. We've knocked down more than 1,000 of their spacecraft and killed their occupants. So, I mean, if they were like we are, they would have had, with technologies 100,000 years more advanced than ours, it'd be all over, my friend. But, you know, it sells movies, it sells tickets, it sells books to rattle the saber and scare everyone. Everybody likes a good horror show, and that's what 99% of ufology is. But now that this is getting serious, we can't afford that kind of buffoonery to creep into the disclosure that could happen out of the White House and Secretary of War, so, or the Congress. So this is why we're trying to step up this effort very aggressively. You know, we're a small unfunded group of volunteers. I have no official standing with the government. And frankly, I don't want one. If it was offered, I would reject it out of hand. By the way, when I do these briefings, there are no non-disclosure agreements in place. I refuse, all the way back to the briefing the CIA director and the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Nothing. I refuse to be restricted because I feel like I need to stay clean from all that encumbrance so that I can speak truthfully to
Yeah.
whoever about it, whether it be to you and the public or to a senator. And once you sign a non-disclosure agreement with national security strings, they own you, right? So that's why I've never done it. I'm just giving you a little insight into my strategic thinking, which is unusual. Most people want that. I don't want it. And I've rejected it. Back in 92, when I was offered to be pulled into that organization, keeping this secret, the head of Army intelligence, or the former head, General Stubblebine, personally offered me $2 billion to betray my purpose and be part of their little goose-stepping bunch of fascists. I said, no, gracias. I'm not interested. Go away. But I know I'm sort of a character that way. I go, nah, I don't need it. Bye. Not that I'm wealthy. I'm not. I'm a retired emergency doctor, like the show ER, shooting, stabbings, fun stuff. Anyway, but good preparation for this ER. But that's why I think we have to look at this very carefully, and the public needs to be aware. The president and the Secretary of War can only release what they have access to.
Right.
We need to work to get them access outside the system through the back door.
Okay.
And the reason we have it is that, like, anyone who wants to can read this. This is the president's briefing document. It's on our website, drstevengreer.com. Now, it's redacted for sensitive material, but you can get this. And I did a one-sheeter that with the executive orders for, but this is the 340 some page thing. And this actually has everything you would want to know, everything. But that's legitimate, including whistleblower testimony and top secret documents and other things. Now, the bigger question is, these folks are very busy and they're going to outsource it. And Mr. Higgs has already said he has people he's going to turn it over to.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days ago, it came out, he was going to ask people at Arrow, the office in the Pentagon. And we know that has become a criminal enterprise that is being looked at criminally for having covered up. I took whistleblowers in there through Senate intelligence contacts, who then, Dr. Kirkpatrick, who is the head of Arrow, who's left, deliberately covered it up. And when his reporting back to Congress, and he was castigated, he was reprimanded by the chair and co-chair, Mr. Warner and Mr. Rubio of Senate Intelligence. I have the letter of how they castigated him and reprimanded him for this. So that is not a clean vehicle. Arrow has become corrupted. I think it was ordered by the Congress, for a fact, to look into the bottom of this, and immediately the foxes in the hen house came in, made sure nothing important got back to the Congress. Yeah. This old two-step game has been going on since the 50s, my friend. And it's time that we call it out for the nonsense it is, right? Yeah. So that's a huge mistake. So when I saw that Mr. Hegsteth was going to pivot to expect anything truthful to come out of Arrow, I went, big mistake, huge mistake number one, ding, Yeah. So this is a problem. And you can only reach the assessment you can from the information you have, right? And he is not going to get good information from inside that system, because the system is filled with people who are intelligence operatives at representing the cover-up folks, right? And this is like playing chess in frickin' 38 dimensions. It's very complicated. I wish it weren't so. I wish it were very clean and direct, but it's not.
Yeah, that's very good context about what the president actually knows. And there's a whole lot to unpack there, but you briefly mentioned the Epstein files. And one thing that a lot of people have speculated about is that this additional information or promises about UFO disclosure are a distraction from the Epstein files. Do you believe that that's part of the equation here?
No, but there are problems. There is a tangential issue that I have to be careful discussing. I will tell you that there are key people in the intelligence community who are in those files or similar files. And that is a real hindrance to disclosure and to this information coming out honestly. Because remember, the Epstein Island whole fiasco was a honeypot set up by the intelligence community to entrap and control powerful people, both governmental and corporate. That was its purpose. It's called a honeypot, and that's what it was. And there are people who are encumbered, and I know who they are. I know what's on the videotape, and I know who is holding them, and I know who is blackmailing them. Now, I'll just put that out there, and anyone from the executive branch or DOJ that wants to talk to me can give me a call. But that's all I'm going to say on the air.
That's fair enough. So you mentioned the disinformation campaigns and different false information that has been circulating in the public. I know that you've been very vocally critical of the film that came out. I'm losing the title now. Last year, The Age of Disclosure.
Oh, Age of Deception, we call that. Yes.
Right. So for anybody who has seen the film,
Mhm.
what should they know about it if they're under the impression that everything in it is legit? What should they know?
What they should know is that if you're going to do a disinformation piece or any about disinformation intelligence, there's disinformation in the center of it, but you put it's like a piece of candy, and you put something very tasty and yummy on the outside. So you swallow it, and then you take the disinformation, the poison pill, with the sweet candy, right? Chocolate coated disinformation. So just remember that as a operating system within the intelligence community. So much of what's in there has mirrored what Disclosure Project has said.
Mhm.
And yet they spin it towards in two directions that are false, that are key. One, that it's a threat to the national security. Well, what's the threat? The NHI aren't the threat. The ETs, the extraterrestrial civilizations, aren't. We can prove that by the fact you and I are still breathing the free air of Earth. I mean, this planet would have been shut down a long time ago if they were that kind of a hostile threat, like the way humans are. Number two, they leave out the fact that 80% or more of all the UFOs and UAPs seen are ours, man-made. And those are the ones that have been used to stage psychological warfare operations such as abductions, mutilations, injuries, and though we can prove this. And so what it leaves out leaves this big gaping opening for this freight train of disinformation to come out saying all the things that have happened by UFOs are these bad aliens, when it's actually been a CIA operation or through the aerospace companies. And we can prove this. I mean, let's not forget a very preeminent, astrophysicist who was in the 70s and 80s, a well-known UFO researcher, Dr. Jacques Vallée, admitted in a book, and we have the reference in our movie, The Lost Century, that he had a document, and it's in the Cosmic Hoax as well, our other documentary, and these are all up on Tubi. You can see them for free. And he said and admitted he had a document, official, CIA, from 1985, 41 years ago, where the CIA admitted to using their UFOs and to engaging in the abduction of peasants, quote unquote, their word, not mine, in Argentina and Brazil for its, quote, psychological warfare value. Now, that's black and white, prima facie proof. I have actually briefed, I've debriefed nearly 1,000 top secret whistleblowers. In our archive, you can go to online, dpiarchive.com. You'll see the names and all the information of 115 or 20 of them, but there are another 600 and some that are blackened out that don't want to be known publicly. But so the Disclosure Project is sort of the clearinghouse and aggregator that I just have done, as a volunteer over the last 30 some years of all this intelligence from hundreds of sources. And so back in the 90s, I actually debriefed and met with men who operated the man-made UFOs out of Lockheed Skunk Works and Northrop Grumman that had assets on them, initially just disguised looking kind of deformed, small, short men, I hate to say it, and then later kind of robotic creatures, and then later biologicals that look like an alien to abduct people. And they did the same thing to do all the mutilations and other scary things. Now, why would they do that? Well, as Werner von Braun, who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler, said, he was brought into our aerospace programs in the 40s and 50s under Operation Paperclip after World War II. Werner von Braun's right-hand spokesperson for the last 5 years of his life is on our team, Carol Rosin. And on his deathbed, he said, Carol, we're going to hoax an alien threat because we want to unite the world around a military industrial sort of global complex to fight the aliens, even though they're not hostile, as a way of controlling the world, sort of a totalitarian dystopia that this organization in the 50s decided this is what they were going to do. So that is the truth. Now, nobody wants to hear the truth. They think it can't be. But whatever technologies you think exist in human hands, it's 1,000 times more advanced. Let's not forget that on his deathbed, Ben Rich, the very famous president of the Lockheed Skunk Works, all the secret aerospace engineering goes on out in the Mojave Desert, said the week he died to Jim Goodall, a very famous aerospace historian who's on our team, who said, anything you can imagine, we've already done. Anything you've seen in Star Trek, we have. And it's not at Area 51, it's out in the desert out here. Now, I've been to that site. I've been in a chopper over the underground opening and filmed it and given it to the Senate Intelligence Committee. 3 weeks later, I was almost killed in a terrible accident. I'm sure you've heard. But so the point I'm making is, you know, the movie Age of Disclosure, which is Age of Deception, is a very carefully crafted disinformation piece that pulls the curtain back on a lot that's true, that's in there, but then spins it. The spin masters spin it into, it's a threat to the national security. Well, this is a way of saying, give us more money, right?
Mm-hmm.
By those same people. And it also leaves out the most important fact, and that is most of the UFOs people see are ones that started operating in the late 1950s up till now, that are triangular, disc-shaped, circular, every shape that an ET craft can be. They have made a facsimile, a copy that would fool almost anyone from the president on down. And this is why we did this book that just came out. Not that anybody reads anymore, but this is an illustrated history of disclosure. And it has dozens of crash retrieval cases of both man-made and ET craft, with named, everyone in here is a named military witness, right? So it has a provenance to it. And we also have a section that shows the ET craft and the ones that look similar that are man-made.
Okay.
Now, I will say, from the people who are on the retrieval teams, you know, that have knocked down these craft out in remote areas and retrieved the ET craft, they will admit now that our tech has gotten so advanced, it's almost indistinguishable from the extraterrestrial or alien tech, which is very dangerous because this is how you can really fool even very well informed people about it. Because the stagecraft, it's called, the ability to set up a false flag or a hoaxed operation, is so advanced that it would fool most people on the planet. And I would say 99.9% of everybody in the White House and Pentagon and Congress. This is dangerous. And this is why disclosure that is a truthful and complete disclosure is key. What I think Age of Disclosure is the little bit of disclosure that is tailored to deceive policymakers, Congress, the media, and the public, right? So now this does not win me a lot of friends when I talk like this, but I don't care. You know, I'm not here to run for the mayor of Crazy Town ufology. I couldn't care less. I care about the human future. I care about where, if this comes out in the wrong way and it's about to be disclosed officially, we will end up in a catastrophe globally that is like nothing we have ever seen. I mean, we're talking an existential crisis that will threaten the earth and all of humanity if this is handled improperly, right? If this puts Mr. Trump and Hegseth on a war footing with the aliens or some nonsense. Or worse, they just conclude we can't get to the bottom of this, which is what happened to Mr. Obama and Mr. Clinton. And they go, I never got to the bottom of it. And they're not lying. The closest president to get to the bottom of it was Mr. Clinton. He really was. I mean, I'm nonpartisan, just so you know. I have to work with everybody. My institute, Disclosure Project, is completely nonpartisan. I have to deal whoever ends up being in the White House, and not only that. I mean, Americans are so narcissistic. This is a global issue, so I have to deal with people all over the world. Never mind the political parties of the United States. You know, so if I'm on a conservative show, I get attacked. If I'm on a liberal show, I get attacked. And I go, look, this has got to be above that. That's the Truman Show, like Jim Carrey's movie, The Truman Show. It's just something set up to entertain people and have them fight with each other, while the real action is happening up here. So I'm afraid I'm a big skeptic about retail politics as well. I think it's just mostly nonsense. But not that it's not consequential on certain issues, but on something like this, no, it's irrelevant. And so I treat it that way. And just saying that, I will say that, and this is not me saying that, you know, I'm an acolyte of Mr. Clinton or anything like that, but he genuinely tried to get to the bottom of it. He set up an operation of special forces called Team Red to get to the bottom of it. And Team Blue was the regular military. Team Black was this illegal program managing UFOs. But Team Red were all either killed or absorbed into Team Black, and they were eliminated, and he gave up. So that's a 60-second summary of the Clinton 8 years. But I do think now we have an administration that is getting a lot of information. There's a lot of pressure for this to come out now. How they handle it will be his legacy. If he handles it badly, this is way more consequential than the problems with Iran, China, or Russia. And so we're warning him, this one, you can't, let's not screw the pooch on this one, excuse my French, but this has got to be done professionally, and they need expert advisors, and they need real information and not disinformation. And that is very hard for people in those areas to get, because they're reliant on the people around them. Well, a lot of the people who have been embedded around them it's not like they're going to wear a badge saying, I'm wearing two hats. I'm a CIA operative in disinformation, and I'm also on the National Security Council. No. And by the way, there's a term for this called a NOC, N-O-C, non-official cover. I know a lot of people who are NOCs, and they're in the media, they're in politics, they're in corporations. They're actually answering to this organization. And it's done all the time in the intelligence community, right? Where the CIA will embed, or JSOC will embed people, Joint Special Operations Command will embed people in the corporate world or in certain areas of military or government, or staffers in Congress or White House. And they're really there to have eyes and ears, but also to influence things.
Right.
So look, this is complicated. And this is why someone new in the government at this level, like Mr. Hegseth, who was a major and he's a smart guy, he needs some advisors who are not going to gaslighting. So does the president. And I think the problem is, when I met with a former national security advisor for President Trump for his first term, I was told very bluntly that neither that national security advisor nor the president ever received a briefing on this in his entire first 4 years. To which I said, I am not surprised. This is de rigueur. But now that it has gotten on his plate, then now it's time for it to get professionalized, and the kind of, amateur hour nonsense that goes on with things like age of disclosure, that's got to pivot to something serious now, because this is getting serious. Right. Now, this gets into what we just released, a movie called CE5, the New Frontier in Contact. And the reason we released that this week or last week is because that's the answer to what's next. What happens if all this comes out, Rob? Well, here's what's going to happen. People say, well, if they're out there, who are they and why are they here? And who's talking to them and who's making contact? Well, the State Department isn't, the United Nations isn't, no foreign ministry I've dealt with is. So this CE5, let me define that, close encounters of the fifth kind, is when humans initiate and invite dialogue and contact with these civilizations. And that was the originating project that I started in 1990, 36 years ago. And the purpose of it is to, instead of having a military approach to their presence, is to have a ambassador peaceful approach that results in dialogue instead of warfare. Because let's war game this out. Let's give the devil their due and say there are a couple of these civilizations that are hostile or negative or malevolent. I don't think that's true, but let's just say it's true.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to engage them with what? A weapon system? When their technologies are 100,000 years further advanced than a hydrogen bomb? This is madness. Talk about mutual assured destruction. This would destroy the whole planet and all of human civilization. So at a certain point, you've got to, even if you believe that, and I tell people who are real believers in the evil aliens and they're working for Satan and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Like what Tucker Carlson has said.
Yeah.
I go, okay, if that's true, introduce us to them. We want to create a dialogue here because you certainly don't want to get into a shooting war. Now, I will tell you that most of that evil alien stuff is because people are mixing up things from other dimensions and extraterrestrial biological entities from other star systems. And that's done deliberately. So let's talk about unpack another level of disinformation.
Yeah.
You have three things going on, Rob, not one phenomenon. You have the least exposed and known part of this is actually the genuine alien extraterrestrial part. Most of what people hear and see are staged man-made events using AT, advanced technology, reverse engineered from extraterrestrial craft that we have downed. But there's another big component, and that's weird stuff from other dimensions, extra dimensional or interdimensional, that are not extraterrestrial. Now, in other words, it's like when I was at the Vatican with the Pope John Paul's senior theologian in the 90s, Monsignor Balducci, and he said, we were talking about this, and he laughed out loud when I brought this whole issue up. And he said, Dr. Greer, neither angels nor demons require flying saucers.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a demonologist. His specialty was demonology for the Catholic Church and the Pope. And he said, this is so absurd. But now you have people, even J.D. Vance, Congresswoman Luna, Tucker Carlson, who knows the president very well, saying that the aliens are actually from other dimensions and are working on behalf of Satan. Well, now what are we going to do? Have a holy war in space? Right? You see how nutty this is? Now, this is very worrisome because what the intelligence operatives know how to do is attach to someone's core beliefs. So let's say you are a very devout Christian or some other religion. They will attach this issue to a narrative that manipulates your belief. That's what happened to Tucker Carlson. That's what's happened to Congresswoman Luna, for a fact. I know who did it and how they did it. So I briefed her, and in immediately came some people who intercepted her and took her into this black hole of nonsense. So I have to tell you, look, I'll be 71 in June. I'm getting a little long in the tooth and over it, and I'm tired. But I'm just saying that this is something that's very dangerous because they're trying to connect a holy war and sort of an end of the world, eschatological Armageddon sort of perspective on extraterrestrial civilizations that have been observing us for millennia, if not since the beginning of life on Earth. And so I think this is a big mistake. But it's easy, and here's why it's easy. Let me connect one other dot. Any interstellar spacecraft and civilization has to traverse through other dimensions to get here. You are not going to go from this point in space to here in a straight line, because even at the speed of light, that would take too long. And as you accelerate up to the speed of light, you take on infinite mass. If you read, you understand the general theory of relativity. So what happens is that they're here, and they get here, they drop out of, it's like quantum entanglement. It's like taking a space, like a piece of paper, and folding it
Right.
where you're boom. But in doing so, they are actually traversing other dimensions. And so when they could actually be hovering outside your house or studio, and they could be not material 3D, but shifted in another dimension and then pop into this dimension or teleport. Now, it doesn't mean their origin is another dimension.
Right.
Now, things like angels and demons and things like that originate from another dimension, right? And might pop into this dimension sometimes. But an extraterrestrial vehicle is actually traversing. That's why I call them trans-dimensional interstellar, TDIS.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot to unpack for your viewers, but if this gets confused, if you start confusing angels and demons, as well as the fake UFOs and stagecraft from CIA psychological warfare operations with the actual ET presence, we're lost. And it is complicated. Unfortunately, that whole nonsense has a 70-year head start on us, right? It started in the 50s. So do the math. I mean, this has been a very well-funded, multi-trillion-dollar information warfare campaign that started in the 50s. And we can prove that as well.
I'm happy you made that distinction. And I'm curious to know, how much do we actually know about interdimensional beings as opposed to the interstellar ones that are appearing with the UAP phenomenon? And does that not require its own sort of disclosure if there are other beings that exist out there, and some of them may not be benevolent as the NHI are?
Why disclose something that's been known since the dawn of human history? I mean, my grandmother was full Cherokee. They knew about the spirit world, and they knew there were good spirits and bad spirits, right? This is the oldest thing in the humanity. I don't know why this is even a discussion.
Well, because it's something that we've lost in Western culture, I feel.
Well, I mean, that's, America's 4.5% of the world's population, and Europe is another 4.5 or 5. I mean, most of the world has no, it's those of us who think we know frickin' everything because we went to Harvard. Actually, I call it the dumb, smart people, but who, God, I'm so being blunt today, but sorry, you got me. If you get me unplugged, it's really bad news.
That's good. I like it.
Yeah, no, it gets really bad. Give me an old fashioned, and then there we'll go. But I think we have to think about this, and that, that can be addressed, but it's a very big mistake. And this has also been done deliberately. Now, let me put in a little nuance here. There are electromagnetic systems of very high voltage that can create an opening in space around you to bring in something from another dimension. And this is the spooky end. I call it electronic black magic. It's been well developed since the 50s and 60s. A lot of the phenomenon that got laid over what was innately happened at the Skinwalker Ranch is actually man-made electromagnetic warfare systems doing that. I know how it was done. I know when it happened. So you have to understand that there is not just the innate interdimensional or extra-dimensional. You have augmentation systems that actually facilitate that happening, that are also highly secret. And, the question is, how much can we unpack this for the chief executive, the president, the secretary of war, and others? Because this gets into such, I had a CIA guy tell me in 1990, when I was first thinking of starting this on this path, he said, if you tell people the truth, the real truth, it will discredit you, because the truth is more bizarre than the fiction we're selling. There's a CIA guy, an old guy, cigarette chain smoking with long hair. He looked like the cigarette man in the X-Files. But we took a walk on the beach in Florida, and this is 1990, near Gulf Breeze. And I'd gone to a UFO conference there because I was filling out the milieu, the environment. And, he knew what I was planning to do and gave me some very good advice. But what I've discovered, I thought the guy was nuts. And as I started unpacking this over the last 35 years, I realized, man, that guy was spot on. That this old guy. So I have had mentors who have been in the system, starting when I was in the early 90s, who took me under their wing and said, look, this is what's really going on with this. Because when I started out, I really believed all abductions were the aliens. I thought the mutilations were being done by the ETs.
Mhm.
I didn't understand any of this, right? And I mean, I wasn't a stupid guy. Didn't know. I was a young doctor in my mid 30s, and how would you know? So now we're at this point, and I think that there are so many decades of misinformation, disinformation, and false mythologies that are embedded into our consciousness that we're going to have to address that
Yeah.
in the post-disclosure world, which is why we did this film, is to say, okay, what can the average person do? They can go out, because we have an app by the same name, the CE5 Contact app.
Mhm.
And, I remember when the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind came out, William Shatner and Demi Lovato and a lot of those people got it. And Demi Lovato went out on her birthday when she turned 27 and did it with some friends. And this big UFO shows up. So she
That's great.
contacted me. I said, yeah, that's what we hear from people all over the world.
Mhm.
So now this new movie is like a follow on to that one that actually gives people more of the hands-on experience of what it's like to be out in the desert doing this and the kind of phenomenon that occurs and kind of how we train people to be ambassadors from humanity to these civilizations. Because I think that as all this begins to come out, I've always said if the people will lead, the leaders will follow. We need to be the leading edge because, I don't think that bureaucrats and politicians necessarily are going to get up to speed on this as well as the man on the street. So I'm a big believer in what, the people part of this. And by the way, I live down the road from Thomas Jefferson's house, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. I say that only because I was talking to a graduate of an Ivy League school recently who didn't know who he was. That's when I thought I'd jump off the roof of my condo in DC onto
It's a
our
little
own
sad.
business. Huh?
It's a little
No, he
sad.
didn't. No, he said, so who's Thomas Jefferson? I went, well, he wrote the Declaration of Independence and was the first Secretary of State and the third president. He said, oh yeah, I may have heard of him. He probably knew Kim Kardashian's bra size, but not.
Probably.
It was scary. Anyway, that's my social commentary for the afternoon.
Very accurate. I'm really interested in the kind of like social engineering aspect of all this, the public perception and how it's been
Mm,
generated through
yeah,
Hollywood. And we have a very
yeah.
interesting Steven Spielberg film coming out later this year. Fascinating timing for this movie called Disclosure Day. Do you have an
Not
opinion on
not a
that?
coincidence. Not a
I'm
coincidence.
sure it isn't.
Yeah, no.
What's your take on that?
I haven't seen it. The trailer looks like a horror film.
Yeah.
And I think Mr. Spielberg got turned. He went from Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the warm and fuzzy ET movie to scary stuff.
Yeah.
And my understanding from I spoke to his son, Max Spielberg, some years ago. I was in Santa Monica and we had dinner. And he told me about this terrifying, really terrifying home invasion at the Spielberg home that happened. It sounded exactly like, in fact, when he described it, I said, I know what that was. It was one of these extra dimensional electronic warfare systems run by intelligence operatives, but it looked alien and it was very scary. And I know this has happened. The Crown Prince of Liechtenstein, who I met with in 94, who told me we needed to have a global war against the aliens. His brother, Prince Albert, not Monaco, but Liechtenstein, was abducted by one of those systems out of the castle in Liechtenstein. He told me this, and then I heard it from Prince Albert himself. So I think what happens is that people who have high value for media and communications can have something very scary happen that they think is extraterrestrial, and it isn't. Now, Are they read in or briefed on what those technologies are? No, because to acknowledge that there are humans that have tech that advanced, it is a bridge too far for most people. Their minds can't go that far. And I said, this is why they need to listen to what Ben Rich said 30 years ago in 1995 when he was dying. Anything you can imagine, we already have at this. Now imagine 30 years later, all right? Because the technology curve, it started out in the 40s, 50s like this, and then went boom, straight up.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just include aircraft. It includes electromagnetic warfare systems, things that can interface with consciousness, electronics that can affect all kinds of things, like put the Havana syndrome technologies on steroids, right? So you have the ability to deceive at a level from the humans that want to alter this. And then they can influence ufologists, influencers, celebrities like Mr. Spielberg, filmmakers, politicians, corporate people. And it's like taking candy from a baby. I know the guys who have those systems and how they operate. And the danger here is that if that is to be believed, then it moves the whole world into being unified together, but not in peace, in real endless war in space, right? And that is what Werner von Braun begged Carol Rosin to expose on his deathbed. This is the guy who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler. I'm telling people I'm raising this alarm now because I know this is coming forward. And if it comes forward in the way it's been planned since the 50s, remember, this is a 70-year-long plan. It's like this organization, businesses and politicians think in terms of the next quarter, 6 months, the next election. This organization has been planning this since the 50s. It's like China and in Asia, they think decades and centuries. Americans, we think the next quarter, 6 months.
Yeah.
Very, very myopic, right? And that is our Achilles heel, right? Because most people don't think the long game. And I think we need to start thinking the long game, because what comes next? Well, after all this comes out, are we going to pivot towards conflict, which would be, I think, the end of human civilization? Or do we go towards CE5 contact, make peaceful contact? We, the people, model this for our leaders around the world, and they see it can be done. And then the technologies start coming out, not all of them, but we start bringing out what I call the phase one technologies that would run your house and our cars out of, quote, free energy, 0 point or quantum vacuum energy. I think the things that fly, the anti-gravity systems, can't come out yet because they will be, you look what's going on in the Middle East. Imagine a missile, not a ballistic rocket like from the 40s with Werner von Braun, but one of these devices loaded with armament, moving at 300,000 miles per hour with no sonic boom. That's what we have. That cannot go out and just be proliferated around the world until we have a stable, peaceful planet. And that ain't happened yet. So I think, however, this is why I've recommended all the way, if you look at my archive, what I recommended to the Clinton administration when they were pivoting to drill down on this was the technologies need to come out in phases. Phase one would be something that would end poverty and save the biosphere, end all pollution, and would also lift the economy globally, right? Because 3 billion people, I don't know if you know this, on planet Earth don't have fuel even to cook their food. That's why they're cutting down the rainforests and the deserts. So we could fix this in 15, 20 years. Now, it means that you'll have to transition out of oil, hooray, and coal, and solar, and wind, and Tesla battery car, the fake Teslas. I call them fake. A real Tesla car wouldn't have to be plugged into a power grid. Right. And the power grid is being fueled by what? Coal and gas, 88%, right? It's a joke. I mean, it's a head fake, environmental head fake.
Yeah, the side that people don't see.
Well, they don't see it because they believe the PR of the companies and Wall Street. But in reality, a real Tesla car, which he had in 1920, people need to look at this movie, The Lost Century. The Lost Century unpacks this in less than 2 hours and goes through all the details. So my point here is all of that should have been out before I was born. But some of these other things, let's call it the very high-tech things that fly or teleport, you don't want that in the hands of terrorists in Mogadishu or the Ayatollahs in Iran, or for that matter, even the hands of most Western governments. I think we have to be very careful. And so this gets into a policy decision. And see, what I think is that this is going to come out, and our leaders need to have a full and comprehensive understanding what the issues are.
Yeah.
And right now it's sort of skin deep. And I think the saying a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Boy, is that true in this subject. I mean, and it is going to come out, but it cannot come out improperly, because then we're talking about a disaster. And so I tell people, be patient. Eventually, the things that would allow you to be in a anti-grav craft and go from here to LA in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, that'll come out eventually, but not in the next couple years. So I think we have to look at a gradual disclosure of the tech that is, you can't put a time on it. It's when human civilization is peaceful enough and there is collective security where globally we all agree no one's going to use this as a weapon system, right? And then if anyone does, the whole world stops them, not just one country or a block of countries. But see, we don't have that level of global cooperation yet. We're still a bunch of squabbling nation states, right? And this is going to force us to get past that, or we're stuck technologically. We're stuck in the 1800s. That's why I call the movie The Lost Century. So that is another thing to unpack with policy people, National Security Council, Congress. But see, all that stuff, it's a very deep dive. I mean, we're just, in an hour or less than an hour, have touched the surface of this. But now that this is, I think, going to come out one way or another, the only way it doesn't is that they come up empty-handed or decide the information is too explosive and go right back to the cover-up of the Condon Committee of 1969.
Do you
right?
feel
So
like
that could happen. That could happen where they just go full circle and boom, there's nothing to see here next, right?
Is that a real possibility? Because I kind of feel like the genie's out of the bottle a little bit. Will people accept that at this point?
No, they won't. And this is what I'm telling them. I'm telling people in Congress and I'm telling White House folks that there is no way that's going to fly. I mean, people are way more sophisticated now. The internet, people, shows like yours and others, and about a year ago, I was on Khloe Kardashian's podcast, and she dropped it. And there's no way this is going to fly in 2026. So that kind of game, they may try it, but then what will happen is the administration will lose all credibility. Just like Arrow, the Arrow office that totally covered up our witness testimony and lied to Congress. They've lost all credibility.
Right.
That department in the Pentagon that was set up by Congress. Because, and by the way, we have proven, let me give you an example. One of our whistleblowers was a Marine who went to Indonesia on an expedition, a humanitarian rescue mission after that tsunami and earthquake in 2009, and Mike Herrera. And Michael Herrera was on an expeditionary force and his platoon of about 6 guys, and they came across this gigantic 300-foot diameter UFO, but it was a man-made. It was probably a Lockheed device. And it was armed with mercenary guys, heavily armed. It almost killed them. And they were transporting humans in crates to put them into human trafficking and human experimentation. Fact. Now, his account has been confirmed by other people in the intelligence community. Now, when he went first, he approached me. I brought him and introduced him to Senate Intelligence and Armed Services folks. They then, without Arrow knowing it was coming from us, from the Disclosure Project, took him to the Pentagon Arrow office in a skiff. And he told his whole story. Arrow then falsified his account, said he encountered an extraterrestrial craft because they're trying to cover up that was our criminal activity. This proves that Dr. Kirkpatrick was there covering this up. And this happened to multiple credible whistleblowers whose accounts have been confirmed, where Arrow falsified. And this is a big warning to Mr. Hegsteth. You can't go into that. Is a snake pit of deception. Now, whether it's gotten cleaned up a little since Dr. Kirkpatrick left, I don't know. But I can tell you we can prove, and it is being looked at criminally for what happened, because they used a huge amount of taxpayer dollars. They lied to Congress. They deceived the people who funded them through a congressional order bill that was part of the line item for the Department of Defense funding. And so that is not a way to go, Mr. Hegsteth. And we will make that clear. So I think that the public needs to understand that that is the kind of game that gets set up. They set up a panel. It gets infiltrated by people who are the foxes in the hen house, and then they falsify everything. So the big problem with the president having publicly put that statement and order out for Hegsteth, it kind of now has set up an expectation and a timeline. It can't go on forever. But it also means that where are they going to get their information from? Arrow, which is what Mr. Hegg said. No, you're going to be completely gaslit and deceived. So now this is getting into a crisis. Our team is in full crisis mode right now. I won't say who's on it, but it's military people, it's law enforcement. There are a lot of people in the system working with me, and we're going, oh boy, here we go.
I can imagine. You did mention Tesla briefly before, and that kind of made me think of a point that I wanted to bring up regarding technology, AI, and it ties into consciousness too. So maybe this is a good place to land the interview, because it goes back to the subject of your film also.
Yep.
With, Elon Musk is talking about Neuralink and integrating AI into our biology. Like, where do you see that going? Is that a risk in itself of taking things too far, maybe like polluting ourselves or ruining our capability to consciously, connect with these beings?
I think that this gets into a whole discussion of what we possess innately versus what we need to do through chemicals or electronics. Now, you can electronically augment your what's called remote viewing capability, which is your ability to use consciousness to see remotely. As the CIA program was called remote viewing. So in the CE5 Contact app, we teach you how to do that. It's in there. And then you use that to not only see, but then with your thought, connect to their awareness, but also their technologies, because they do have, the ETs have, it would be like a little thing like this, that would connect to your thought thinking to it, but it's not through wires. It's not like Neuralink. It's an actual mind or conscious field thought interface directly, wireless. It's thought, machine, thought. Now, that's fine so long as you've also developed your innate abilities in a commensurate way. It's almost like people who like to use like hallucinogens to get there. I go, that's a crutch. It's going to damage your neurons, and in the long run, it's not going to be very successful because you're going to be dependent on that. It's better to develop it innately. And before I was a medical doctor, I was a meditation teacher and studied Sanskrit and the Vedas and all that. And I think that what's better is to do it innately. So what we teach is to develop your innate aptitude and then apply it. Now, down the road, I'm sure there will be technological augmentation of that ability, but that's kind of risky if you don't have the innate enlightenment so that you don't misuse it. Because let me say something about technology. Technology is neutral. It's the egos, it's the consciousness of those who wield it. It can be good or bad. Look, I'm a trauma doctor. I saw people killed with the same knife that can be used to cut your bread, right?
Yeah.
So you can use it to cut your bread. You can use it to slit your throat or stab through the left ventricle of your heart. I've seen both. And so it's the same thing with any technology, whether it be Elon's or these electromagnetic systems or transportation systems or what have you. And see, this was the crisis Einstein had at the end of his life, where he regretted that he unpacked what he did because it led to the hydrogen bomb, right? I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I've heard
Albert
about that.
Einstein was very upset about it because he
That
realized,
was
so
actually at the end of the Oppenheimer movie, they feature that.
yes,
Einstein,
that's
yeah.
true. Yes. And I think this gets into the question of it's a more existential question. What do we want to do when we grow up as humans? Do we want to stay in this path where every new toy and technology we develop is deployed just for profit or for war or for force? Or do we want to develop into a true golden age society that's enlightened? So I think this actually at the crux of this problem is human consciousness and awareness in the human heart. And what do we want to do? And I know that sounds, with all the things I've been saying, sort of mushy, but it's really where the rubber meets the road. I think we have many crises, but at the root of it is a spiritual crisis, not religious. I distinguish between spirituality and organized religion.
Mhm.
Usually the twain don't meet, but frankly, I mean, there are some religious people who are spiritual, but generally it becomes just fanaticism and hatred. If you doubt it, go to the Middle East,
Mm.
where I lived for 3 years. And I think that there's an issue here, and that is, if we don't develop our spiritual awareness and our conscious abilities innately, whereas a machine doesn't make that happen, or drugs, eventually what we're going to do, we're going to have all this technology come out. And what are we going to use it for? More war, more domination, some other psychopath in Silicon Valley or tech person using it to exploit people. Yes, I mean, there's a dystopian part of technology and there's something that's very beneficial. But again, I get back to, what is the consciousness that wields it, that has it? And
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to start having also a conversation about, even though it sounds very kind of soft. But I think it's essential that we have that discussion. And it doesn't have to be a religious one. It can be one that deep in human consciousness and spirituality. And that's why the foundation of the CE5 contact program is very deeply based in transcendent consciousness and spirit, um, but it's also a very specific technology in a way. But we're not using a device. Now, early on in the early 90s, I had a man who in the late 50s had invented a headset like you're wearing that could put you in that remote viewing conscious space. And his company got bought out by a front company for the CIA. And he offered it to me. He was very elderly then, in his 80s, mid 80s. And I said, no, thanks. Because that's something that, first of all, I can do it innately, and I can train other people to do it innately. And I don't think people need that crutch yet, because it can be abused. And that kind of technology needs to be connected to people who are centered in something greater than themselves. Let me just put it out there. It can't be based on what kind of power, money, and sociopathic endeavor can I engage in.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, the technology would be great if it was in the hands of people who were kind and thinking of others and thinking of the benefit of humanity. And beyond that, the benefit of life in the cosmos. So I think that's where we need to move to. And that's the whole purpose of this CE5 movie, is to show, and it's actually very joyful. People come together, we have a great time. And by the way, we're going to do here in May, we're going to do an event for, now only 20 people can come personally. So if you want to come, contact us.
All right.
Here in Virginia. So we have a retreat center house out in Hot Springs, Virginia, near the Omni Homestead and the Thomas Jefferson Hot Spring pools. And we're going to, do mainly a whole unpacking of the hidden story of disclosure. But then at night, if it's weather allows, we'll go out and do CE5 contact, which will be wonderful. And then in July, at the end of July, we're going to do about 350 people here up on top of a mountain nearby. And we're going to be out there doing this whole CE5 contact with a whole group. That'll be great fun in late July. So, people want to come to that. There are more room there than at our retreat center. But so that'll be a good experience. And if you can't be there in person, we're going to webinar it so people can go along with us. So you could go out with your contact team in Minnesota or wherever you are, and you can be there with us as we're doing the whole process, and it will be fun. I think, for people to do that from home. Because I actually think what they proved with the studies in consciousness in the 70s and 80s is that when a certain number of people start doing things in deep meditative states, it actually alters the environment of people who don't even know you're doing it. It was called the Maharishi effect, but it's that 1% effect, where when about 1% of a population taps into that transcendent, more enlightened state of consciousness, it affects everyone else in a way that they don't even know.
Yeah.
And they did studies where emergency room visits went down, violent crime rates went down, when there was about 1% of the population were all at the same time in a meditative state. And it's fascinating because you realize then we're all interconnected at that quantum entangled conscious level, where consciousness, I mean, you're an individual, I'm an individual, but the faculty, the ability for us to be awake is a singularity. There's only one conscious mind that is shining in all of us. So when you connect to that, it's not only beautiful, but it's actually really beneficial, mind, body, spirit, all of it, and also to society, interestingly. So that's the foundation of what we do with CE5 contact. And it's why it works, because these interstellar civilizations 100% understand this, right? They 100% understand it. Their whole technological and social structure is based on the science of consciousness.
Fascinating stuff. I recommend that everybody watch your new film. I did. It's a great inside look into the CE5 experience. Really
It's
enjoyed
fun.
it.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll have a link to that in the show
Great.
notes here for everybody
Great.
to check out. And yeah, I just wanted to thank you again for your time. It's always great
Thank
to speak with
you.
you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And hey, come out to one of these things. You'd have fun.
I would love to. Yep.
All right.
Hopefully we can make that happen.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Greer,
All
take
right.
care. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you for watching. See you next time.